Tuesday? It is, and I'm Pastor Ben Hayes from First Baptist Church, Dadeville, Alabama, bringing you our thought for the day. Let's make this a terrific Tuesday. You know how you do that? You share the love of Christ with somebody who needs it. That's the best way to do it. Right now, we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and we're at this part of the letter that is difficult for pastors to preach on. But since I'm not preaching today and I'm just sharing a thought for the day with you, I'm not going to have any trouble with this, all right? Because remember, we finished off yesterday by talking about that old thing that God's going to keep pastors humble and churches are going to keep them poor. Well, unfortunately, that is a mindset that is very real in our world today. And as I said yesterday, First Baptist takes care of me and our staff very well. uh, no complaints at all. But there are a lot of churches who have this mindset that pastors have to make very little money. Well, that was the same thing in Corinth. Apparently, there were some people who were saying, we pay the preacher too much. And listen to what Paul says. He says, do I say these things as a mere man? In other words, is he just saying this because this is something he's thought up, or is this from God? And it is from God. And then he says, or does not the law say the same also? Taking it all the way back to the Old Testament. All the way back to the Old Testament. Now, keep in mind what I said yesterday. God had set aside very important rules, made very important rules, telling the Jewish people that they had to take care of the priests, and the priests were well taken care of. Now, look at how he describes this in verse 9. For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. Now, think about that. The ox is connected to the grindstone. He's got this big long pole out there, and he's going around in a circle. And some of the grain that was supposed to go into the mill pops out onto the ground. And naturally, the oxen is going to reach down, and he's going to take a couple of bites here and there and enjoy the corn, the grain, whatever it is that has popped out. There was some mindset said, well, we need to muzzle the ox so he doesn't do that. Paul says the law tells us that you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. God specifically put that out there. And it's not just because God is concerned about oxen. He's concerned about the lesson this teaches. Now listen to what he says. Is it oxen God is concerned about? Or does he say it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he who plows should plow in hope, and he who threshes in hope should be partakers of his hope. If we have sown spiritual things for you, is it a great thing if we reap your material things? If others are partakers of this right over you, are we not even more? Now, I want you to think about this, because in Corinth, this was a nation where the Greeks loved to learn. They loved to debate. They loved their philosophy. They loved especially these teachers who would come in, and many of them would come in and just teach an impromptu class, and people would pay them for it. Paul says, well, if that's the case, shouldn't we who come in to teach you the greatest lesson in all of life, shouldn't we also be able to enjoy the benefits of our work? Shouldn't we reap from what we have sown? Shouldn't we reap from what we have plowed? Shouldn't we enjoy the harvest along with you? And of course, he's talking about financial situation. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. Paul did not receive a lot of money from the churches that he planted. He supported himself as a bivocational minister. He created tents. He was a tent maker. And there are a lot of guys in our world today who are serving in churches where they are doing the same thing. They're bivocational, co-vocational. They're working another job in order to support their families, and they're preaching as well. But Paul says, look, here's the thing. Churches, you ought to be paying your pastors. You ought to be taking care of your ministers. And I say this without hesitation because most of these guys have gone through, they paid for their education on their own, they have worked hard all of their lives, and they're putting in 50, 60, 70 hours a week to minister to their community, because that's the nature of ministry. And they deserve to be cared for, to be paid. And I want you to think about this. An equivalent professional, based on education and experience, would be making lots of money in the business world. Now, I want you to hear me when I say this. The majority of pastors are not in the pastorate for the money. Get this. They're not doing it because they want to get rich. They could get rich doing something else. They're doing it because God has called them and has given them a passion to do the work of the ministry. But Paul says over and over again, a workman is worthy of his hire. Take care of your pastors. Be blessed, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.